Bobby LaMarco, and I was on mute, baby. So all that great intro, see you later. Gotta love live. But if you're checking in from YouTube, if you're over on Twitter, the good news is I was on mute. You haven't gone deaf. Congratulations. It was a malfunction on my end. Today, we're going to be talking about must-have quarterbacks for 2024. We're going to be talking about 4 quarterbacks today that we really love. Most of these guys are kind of going in the middle rounds, not the top tier guys. So a lot of excitement here. Everybody who listens to this show today will have a chance to get this guy, especially in rounds 4 through 8. So it's going to be a lot of fun to talk must-have quarterbacks. Let's bring in our guests, starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube chat. And that's right, folks. It's like the QB guru. The man has been hosting the Razzball quarterback rankings all off season long. It's Derek Favret. You can follow him under Derek_Favret on Twitter. What's going on, Derek?
How you doing, Bobby? How you doing out there on the left coast?
You know what? It's still early here. I know last night we had a long night. We did the Razzball mock draft. And by the way, folks, if you haven't heard, tomorrow is it. There is no more signing up after tomorrow. If you're watching this, go to razzball.com and sign up for the Razzball and go check out the Razzball mock. We had a lot of fun names on the show last night. And Derek had a late evening. It was like midnight by the time you were done. I saw that you were getting really sleepy. The last few rounds, I'm sure you were probably half asleep. How do you feel about the Razzball draft?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Like you said, we had some recognizable names from the industry out there. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, we did burn the candles pretty late last night here on the East Coast. But it was worth it. You know, we're drafting fantasy football. It's worth it.
You know what, too? And the best part is I didn't even give you a day off. I said, you know what, Derek? I don't care how late you worked last night. You're coming back on tomorrow because you have to talk quarterbacks with me. And you know what you said? Without even blinking an eye, I'm in. And that's why we love you. You're a hard worker, my friend. Today we're going to talk about must-have quarterbacks heading into training camp in the preseason. Now, listen, we're always ahead of the game here, but during the offseason process, we've had coaching changes. We had player changes. We've had injuries. We've had a bunch of things happen that kind of shape our mindsets on these guys heading out of 2023. But what's your overall mindset about the quarterback position heading into 2024?
Yeah, I think if you, in fact, what I would say is take a snapshot of the quarterback projections or the quarterback rankings now, and then revisit that about Christmas time. And I think we're going to see a flip. I think, and a lot of the names that we normally associate with the top 5, top 6, I bet we're going to see about half of those outside. And we're going to see some names, maybe even the ones we talk about tonight, that are going to be top 6, top 8 quarterbacks. So I think it's going to be a real interesting year and a pivotal year for quarterbacks fantasy.
And yeah, and honestly, when we were kind of saw last night in the Razzball, and now listen, Razzball is a little different. It is kind of a best ball format for the first half of the year. But because there's so many good quarterbacks this season, I never felt like concerned about drafting a quarterback. I was able to allow the quarterback I really like fall to me, and I got CJ Stroud in round 6, which is, in my opinion, absurd. He's definitely a top 5 quarterback for me this season, and I've kind of felt that way about some of the tiers when it comes to the Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes tier, and then even when you go down one to guys like Richardson and Jordan Love, Brock Purdy, Kyler Murray types, those I still feel awesome. Whatever one of those 10 quarterbacks I get. So I think it's definitely going to shape. I would not be surprised in most drafts if I'm the last guy to take a quarterback because of that. But let's get into some of the must-have guys we have for today. The first one is Trevor Lawrence. Now, Trevor Lawrence is going through a little bit of a shakeup this offseason with some of his skill position players, but he gets another season under Doug Peterson. What's your thoughts about Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah, and I think some people are probably surprised to see Trevor Lawrence and must-have quarterback in the same sentence. But, to be honest with you, this year, I think he's going to maybe not fulfill his potential, but he's going to live up to more closely the expectations that he did coming out of college. I mean, he hasn't to date, and that's a fair statement. So he's probably going to be outside the top 10 quarterbacks taken in drafts. And I think because of that, there's going to be value to be had. And I think he's a must-have, whether he's your first quarterback and you wait, like you said, because I'm pretty much the same way. I'm going to, in a standard, or quarterback league, if you're not playing in something like Scott Fish Bowl where there's, inflation of quarterback value, I'm going to wait on quarterback as well. And Trevor Lawrence is a name I'm looking at. I mean, he's entering his 4th season. Like you said, he has a new cast, essentially. I mean, Ingram became a really dependable target for him last year. He had 143 targets last year, and Christian Kirk comes back as well. But then you add Gabe Davis. You can argue Gabe Davis, is he, what we think he is, but I think he's a great fit here in Jacksonville, as well as, the consensus for rookie quarterback coming out of college, Brian Thomas. I mean, you have Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas taking the place of Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones. I think that's a good fit for Trevor Lawrence. I mean, last year was a down year by many standards, but he still threw for over 4,000 yards. His touchdown to interception rate is better than 2-1. I mean, he's actually playing pretty well, but so it's under the radar. And to me, that's why he's a must-have this year. I think he's going to be a great value. He finished 12th last year in fantasy, 7th the year before. So I really think Trevor Lawrence is a name to consider when all the other guys are in your league are scrambling for Jalen Hurts and those other running quarterbacks. You can be patient and go for a guy like Trevor Lawrence as your number 1, or even better as your number 2, and wait on him and see how this develops. But I think his 4th year is going to be the best year for him this year.
Yeah, and you know what? It's nice that at least the Jacksonville Jaguars continue to give him talent around him. Like Gabe Davis is most likely, you could make an argument, their 4th option potentially this season.
Yeah.
And that's a very good 4th option to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you look at these skill sets of guys like Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram, you're going to need big-bodied, fast guys on the outside to really open things up, because Kirk and Ingram, if they are your, let's say for argument's sake this season, 2 of your top 3 options, those guys aren't high ADOT guys. So you're going to want to open things up. And honestly, adding Brian Thomas after losing Calvin Ridley, I think a lot of people forget that Calvin Ridley coming in the last year was out of football for a very long time. And so he came back, was knocking some rust off himself. And then on top of that, Christian Kirk missed 5 games. And Zay Jones, who you talked about, pretty much wasn't healthy all last season. So to be honest with you, when you look at the skill position group, it really was like Evan Ingram, who played very well. And then you had a Ridley kind of growing back into the football shape. They lost Kirk for a little bit. So there's a good chance that the position group this season is better. Now, that being said, I have it exactly at ADP. I have him ranked at 119. His his ADP is 119. I'm having him at 120. To be honest with you, they did add Mitch Morris to the offensive line, which is good, but PFF has it ranked 23rd heading into this season, so that's not too exciting. I think some of the movement around him, I think Brian Thomas, I like him, but I do think there might be a learning curve for a rookie. Gabe Davis, by the way, has been injured all offseason. There hasn't been that much time for them to really get a connection because he's been out most of the offseason. And so I do think that because of the landscape at quarterback right now, I'm actually probably not going to have a lot of Trevor Lawrence, because there's just guys like Jaden Daniels, for example, that I much rather have than him, that I could get easily as the QB 12 off the board. Any thoughts about that before we move on?
Yeah, that's a fair statement. I'm thinking if you can get Trevor Lawrence in the 10th round, that means the rest of your skilled positions on your fantasy team are going to be really solid. Or he is your second quarterback and you're using him on a bye week, or you're waiting for him to see if he really does become a top 10 quarterback again. So basically there's little risk to me for Trevor Lawrence. There's a lot of upside, or there's a lot of potential, put it that way. Like you said, with the skill position around him, this is the best chance he has, to kind of reach that next tier in his career. And so he's worth a shot in my mind. And that's why I have him as a must-have.
Yeah, there's no downside where he's going anymore, right? So that's kind of the point you're making here, is that if you fade quarterback completely, and let's just say you're in a league, a 12-team league, and for some reason you're fading quarterback and guys start taking their QB2s and Jaden Daniels comes off the board and guys like that, and you all of a sudden now looking at the Goffs of the world, the Tuas, the Lawrences, the Herberts, To be honest with you, getting 2 of those guys and seeing which one pops off is not a bad strategy.
Not at
in
all.
2024.
Yeah. I agree.
All right, let's jump to the next one, folks. It's C.J. Stroud, buried honestly my Rise Bowl mock quarterback. Last night I was in the lab just thinking about, and as soon as the draft was over, I texted Derek and I said, C.J. Stroud's the other guy I'm going to talk about today. And the reason why is because I've moved him up into tier 1. I now have him right behind. He's my QB5, but I have him right behind Lamar Jackson as my QB5 heading into this season. 40th overall, his ADP is 46. And so I understand that C.J. Stroud, for example, is not a mobile quarterback. But when I was looking at his situation further, I think he's one of the maybe few quarterbacks that could throw for 5,000 yards this season. Now, I know Bobby Slowick comes from the Shanahan tree, and I know that those passing offenses aren't really volume-based. But if you look at the history of the Shanahan offense, he hasn't had legit quarterback play since Matt Ryan with the Atlanta Falcons. So you look at 2017, it was like C.J. Beathard and Brian Hoyer. Then it was the Jimmy Garoppolo thing, which was more of a game manager type situation. Then it was guys like Nick Mullins and stuff like that. And even when you go back to his Houston days, he had multiple top 10 pass attempt seasons as a coordinator with Matt Schaub. So it's not like he hasn't had pass-heavy tendencies in that system. Now, Bobby Slowick, listen, I like Joe Mixon. He's a good player. But this offense is going to run through C.J. Stroud. You do not have 3 legit number ones and also a very good pass catching tight end to throw the ball 25 to 30 times a game. And here's my rationale, and this is just not me just assuming. Here's the numbers to back that statement up. So, yes, he was the QB 11 last year, 21.8 PPR points per game and 6 points per passing touchdown leagues. However, there was only 7 games last season that Tank Dell and Nico Collins played over 50% of the snaps. Only 7 games that those 2 guys were on the field for 50+, okay? In those games, he averaged 35 attempts and 27.8 fantasy points per game. That's top 3 numbers from last year. This is elite production. That's like what Josh Allen was when he was rolling last year. Definitely elite. Without them, too, there was 8 games that he played. 31.6 pass attempts, his points per game and 6 points per passing touchdown leagues drops to 16.5. Yeah. That is 11-point difference. Now you're going to tell me he gets Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell's the 3 potentially? Okay, I'm buying into that. Now, I know the Tank Dell situation, he had kind of the similar injury to Tony Pollard, so I do think Tank Dell might need a little bit of ramp-up time to get over that injury. The offensive line is still kind of meh. They're ranked 22nd in PFF, but they get a lot of guys back. Tyus Howard, Juice Shrugs, Kenyon Green, all coming back. And plus, you got to love the additions. I mean, Joe Mixon is going to offer them a very competent run game. I know Devin Singletary was solid, but it just, the more you dive into it, I'm all in on C.J. Stroud. I want as much as I can get of him. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I agree. I have him as my 6th quarterback in my rankings right now, and I'm actually expecting him to move up a little bit as well. To your point about Nico Collins and Tank Dell, I mean, he only had 6 games over 300 yards passing, and I suspect that most of those were with, in the category that you mentioned when they both played. But, he did have over 400 yards one game too. And a name you didn't mention, and I think is going to play a big part of the success for Stroud this year, is Dalton Schultz. I mean, Dalton Schultz comes back after his first year together with Stroud in Houston. I mean, he had 3 games over 10 targets, and I think he's going to be kind of the linchpin. Those 3 receivers are going to garner a lot of attention, and I think Schultz is actually primed to have a big year as well. So, yeah, and then you add, like you said, you add Mixon to that mix as well. So he's got a lot of weapons there. He's not a running quarterback, like you said, which, actually bodes well in leagues where, it doesn't, pay to push up the running quarterbacks, because he has so many weapons. And I see a bright future for him. I think in fantasy, he's going to be gold as well, probably in that 5 to 7 range. I think you drafted him yesterday in the 5th round, 6th round,
6th round, which
6th
is
round.
insane.
Yeah, I mean, that's phenomenal value, and I would take that as well. So yeah, I'm in on him as well.
Yeah, the just to kind of highlight what you just said, majority of those 300-yard games did come when they had both them on the field. Only one of those games was when they were not on the field over 50% of the snaps.
Yeah.
So it's kind of clear. I mean, it's kind of, for me, like when you watch Stroud last year, you're like, holy crap, this kid is like lights out. Guys like Noah Brown was an absolute stud for fantasy football for a few weeks. This guy is a talent elevator at quarterback. There's very few of the guys that can elevate the talent around him. And watching Noah Brown like have stretches of brilliance last year made me realize, what is he going to do with Stephon Diggs as his number 3 option, or at least a top 3 wide receiver? So I just love the talent around him. But he's going right around a little bit ahead of your next quarterback, which is Kyler Murray. What's your thoughts about him?
Yeah, Kyler Murray, he's got a cast now that really plays to his strengths. I mean, he's been injured, some, so there is a little bit of risk there. But, when he's on. I mean, he's on the field. He's playing well, and they've got an improved offensive line there as well, so I think that's going to help. But, he's in the second year with offensive coordinator Drew Petzing. The Arizona offense ranked 9th after Kyler Murray returned back from his injury. So that there was a top 10 offense with less weapons. Now he's got Marvin Harrison Jr. there. We mentioned Zay Jones, with leaving Jacksonville. So he comes to Arizona. But Trey McBride as well. He just came out of nowhere to become a stud tight end. So with Kyler Murray in that offense, he's going into a 6th season. So he's an established veteran now. He's got a healthy James Conner, and then Trey Benson coming in as well from Florida State gives a power speed combo that I think is gonna help open it up. And again, that improved offensive line. I think Kyler Murray is primed for probably his best season yet if he can stay healthy. He's got weapons, he's got protection, he's got a running game. He does a little running himself. So if he can improve on his touchdown interception rate, it's been about 2-1 the last 2 seasons. If he can improve on that, keep better control of the ball, get it into his playmakers' hands, and if Marvin Harrison Jr. is anywhere close to what we're predicting, I mean, he's going to have a monster year, maybe even push for Rookie of the Year. And if that's the case, that means Kyler Murray's have a fantastic fantasy season.
Yeah, and the thing with a lot of these guys, and I think when you evaluate every quarterback situation, a lot of these guys don't have elite weapons around them every time. And so I understand that Patrick Mahomes has been awesome for fantasy football. He's been awesome in the NFL. But Patrick Mahomes, when he became a starter, had Tyreek Hill, top 3 receiver, and Travis Kelce, the best receiving tight end, and Andy Reid, who's arguably a top 2 offensive mind in football. And then you go through these other guys, right? And Kyler Murray is another example of this. If you actually look at the games he played with DeAndre Hopkins, when he had a legit number 1, there was 28 games in his career where he had DeAndre Hopkins as his number 1 and played over 50% of the snaps with Kyler Murray. He averaged 34.7 attempts per game, 28 fantasy points a game in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues.
Yeah.
And just to give everybody an example, 6 points per passing touchdown leagues, -2 for interceptions, and then your 25 for every 25 yards, you get a point for passing yards. That's the number 1 quarterback pretty much every year on average. That's where Josh Allen has been over the last few years. So when he has an alpha number 1, he shows it. Now you have Michael Wilson going into his 2nd season. Greg Dortch, for what it's worth, has always played well when he gets extra snaps. He's the slot guy. And then, of course, you just talked about Trey McBride. I really like the fact that the Cardinals offense last year was oddly competent with Josh Dobbs. There was something about Josh Dobbs last year that he was kind of good, which makes you feel like the coaching staff knows what they're doing. And so that gives me confidence for Kyler. And by the way, his 2nd year of this system. So he's going to know the playbook a lot better than last year when he was hurt, did not start the season, did not get all the first team reps. This is his first real off season with this offense, being able to be on the field, taking the reps. So you got to love that as well. The offensive line is a little shaky. They let go of DJ Humphrey. They added Evan Brown and Jonah Williams, who has been kind of a bust. Jonah Williams for the Bengals in his career. They're also moving Paris Johnson to left tackle. So there is a lot of shakeup. Only 2 guys of the 5 are returning. So that could be worrisome, especially if they can't figure that out. But then, honestly, we just brought his name up a little bit earlier. Zay Jones comes in. And by the way, Zay Jones has been a very good 3-4 wide receiver in the NFL. And now, if, for example, he needs to step in for whatever reason, he has proven just 2 years ago with Trevor Lawrence that he could be a very capable fantasy football player and an NFL wide receiver. So I think I like Kyler Murray a lot there. Any final thoughts about Kyler before we move on to our last guy?
Yeah, I just think it was, really to note that he came, he missed the first 9 weeks last year, and he came in week 10 against Atlanta and played the final 8 games. In 6 of the 8 games, he scored over 20 points per game in fantasy. Like you said, no training camp per se, missed 9 weeks of the season, and he comes right out and he's scoring 20 plus in fantasy. And I think, like you said, there's a supporting cast now, which is better or potentially better. He has a healthy off season. He has a healthy training camp. Second year in the system, all signs, at least at this point, are pointing to, a really good value at quarterback, because he's going outside the. He's mine 15, and I don't expect him to stay there by any means going into the season. But he's available, in probably the 9th round in many leagues, and you get someone with that upside in the 9th round. If you're waiting on quarterback, you're really in great shape.
Yeah, he's one of the guys that can finish QB1. Like, obviously, when you're talking about a guy who can rush for 700-800 yards on the ground with ease, he was at 250 last year on a bum leg and coming back from injury. Like, he's there's not a lot of guys in the NFL that can do that. So I have him about 12 spots ahead of ADP. I'm in. He's in a tier with Jordan Love, himself, Anthony Richardson, as like that block of quarterbacks who I feel like aren't necessarily the top tier guys, but they are. I would love any of them coming out of a draft.
I would too. Before going in draft season, any of those 3, if you're walking away with your draft in any of those 3, you're feeling good. Because of where you're getting them and what their potential is.
And I'll say this too. You got Joe Burrow, you got Dak Prescott. And I know Dak Prescott isn't a sexy name in fantasy circles, but the dude was absolutely awesome last year for fantasy football, especially. Hey, by the way, CeeDee Lamb was like, after that 49ers debacle, like Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb just took off. Well, there was a guy throwing him the football who also went absolutely nuts down the stretch. And it wasn't just like 5-6 games. It was like 12 games down the stretch where he was dominating for fantasy. And the only real change this offseason, I know Tony Pollard's gone, but Tony Pollard wasn't even that great last year. So I'm not overly concerned about. And so like Dak, Joe Burrow, and those 3 quarterbacks all lumped together in that 6-7 rounds. I mean, geez, I would love any one of those guys.
Yeah. And that just goes back to your statement you made in the beginning. The quarterback profile this year there's just so many options. You can build your team a number of different ways and come out of it with a really strong quarterback.
So my tier 2 guys is led by another man, and his name is Jordan Love. And it's time, and just pour one out for Matty Styles. Not here in person, but man, he's here in spirit, because I'm showing love to his new boy. By the way, talk about just constantly falling into quarterback. It's ridiculous, Green Bay. We get it. You know what you're doing. I mean, at this point, by the way, everybody crapped on the Falcons for drafting Penix. They did the same thing with Jordan Love a few years ago, and now look at the Green Bay Packers. So the Falcons in 3 years might be all excited. And so with Jordan Love, it's something like, I know this is going to sound, it's sometimes it's like the numbers, and I'll get into the numbers. I always do. But like watching him play down the stretch last year, he looked like the part, the way he moves in the pocket. By the way, he doesn't have an alpha number 1 receiver, but he has probably one of the better depths of receiving cores in the NFL. Like his receiving core between the wide receivers and tight ends you could argue goes 7 deep if you add guys like Bo Melton in there, for example. But his big 6 guys, the 2 tight ends and the 4 main receivers, are all very good, all do something a little different. And he, by the way, with these young receivers, dominated for fantasy football down the stretch last year. So he was the QB5 last year already, just a QB5. 22.7 points per game and 6 point per pass touchdown leagues. That jumps to 26.3 in the final 8 games. In the playoffs, where the brightest lights, he throws for 3 touchdowns and wins his first game against Dallas. Even against the 49ers, even though he didn't play great, threw for 2 touchdowns against the 49ers, almost 200 yards. Not the best game on the road, but still, he showed a lot throughout the stretch down there. The other thing is guys like Christian Watson in and out of the lineup all last year. Jaden Reed was a rookie. Dontavian Wicks was an unknown. Romeo Doubs is a former day 3 pick. Like, this receiving core isn't like all set up to be like he seems like, to me, and one of the themes you'll notice I talk about this, he elevates the talent around him. And so when those guys start elevating themselves, his numbers are only going to go up. So if you tell me Christian Watson's healthy, Jaden Reed has another year under his belt, guys like Romeo Doubs and Wicks are there as well, I am extremely excited. Plus, he lost Luke Musgrave for a few weeks last year too. And then Tucker Kraft comes in, and Tucker Kraft plays well. Everybody who comes and plays well. What does that say? That says that the quarterback is legit. So I am a little concerned that he doesn't run that much, but you could tell by his movement that he is very mobile. And I think that's another element that he could definitely unleash, especially from his days at UCLA. The Packers have 4 or 5 offensive line returning this season. They're top 16, according to PFF. They also drafted a kid in the first round. So Jordan Love is right now today my guy, my must-have in Tier 2. He's number 6 overall. I have him ahead of Burrow, Anthony Richardson, Kyler Murray. What's your thoughts there, Derek?
Yeah, I like the thought. 21 touchdown to 3 interceptions over the last 9 weeks of the season, isn't that something else? And it goes to what you were saying. Okay, Jordan Love sat on the bench behind Aaron Rodgers for a few years, but who else was on that second team offense or on the backfields? Who was he throwing to? Those young wide receivers that are out there now. So certainly there's chemistry there. I mean, they don't, like you said, they don't have the alpha number 1 wide receiver that most other teams do. So, there might be some skepticism for fantasy players, but if you're looking to stack a quarterback with some wide receivers, Green Bay might be a good team to do that, and an affordable team to do that, like you said, because there's most certainly chemistry there. He's a mature quarterback for his age. He can get the ball to where it needs to be, and the results speak for themselves. So, yeah, I like this pick, Jordan Love. He's not the sexy name yet, but this might be the last year that he's not.
Yeah, and I apologize. By the way, he went to Utah State. I don't know why I thought it was UCLA. That was stupid. He actually only rushed for 175 yards his senior season, so he might just be one of those mobile guys, but he definitely looks athletic on the field. He did rush for a few rushing touchdowns last year. But you know what? We hold ourselves to a higher standard here, Derek. And if you say something wrong, God damn it, I'm calling myself out on the podcast. But that's all we got today, folks. Those are our 4 must-have quarterbacks heading into training camp and the preseason. Make sure you jump over to the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button. We're going to be here all offseason long, breaking down the must-have players by position. And Derek, tell the people what you got upcoming at Razzball and everywhere you rate your content.
Yeah, so I'll still be working through the quarterback issues all the way through training camp, give you all the knowledge that you need to know as we navigate the preseason weeks. And then once the season starts, look for a DFS article from me as well. I'm going to use our tools that we love here at Razzball, which are free, and pair those with some of Rudy's genius mind and give you some DFS love. Pardon the pun. To
wow,
yeah, you like that? Get some DFS love right out of the gate.
Right out of the skyrocketed. The numbers skyrocketed. That's good.
Right
stuff.
Out of the gate. So yeah, that's going to be a fun year. We've got a lot going on here at Razzball, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
And by the way, if you haven't checked it out yet, we have to remind you, everybody who watches the video, July 25th is the last day to sign up for the Razzball, folks. It's going to be a lot of fun this offseason. Make sure you go to razzball.com, click on the NFL tab, and hop over to the signups page. You'll be able to sign up for the Razzball or just follow Styles08 on Twitter. The dude is on top of it, posting updates. We're almost at 300 contestants. And by the way, you get a prize for first place. So make sure you go over to razzball.com and jump on there. And don't forget to check out all the great tools. We have the slot versus wide tool for 2023 data is already in there. That's coming again in 2024. We have win versus losses. We have a touchdown tool. We have a bunch of fun data that you can use to help you set your lineups every single week for free. So go check it out on razzball.com. And don't forget, if you want the extra data, we have more premium stats than you can even imagine, red zone data, all the things that you want for each individual player and team. You can sign up for free 3-day free trial and go check it out in the premium subs. Once again, I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. Make sure you subscribe to the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel and go over to IG and TikTok. And make sure you subscribe to Derek. I heard he does some good things over there. Derek_Favret on Twitter. Thank you for joining us once again, folks. We are out of here.